Hello and welcome to the Wellness Connection podcast with Fiona Kane. I'm your host, Fiona Kane. And today I have a guest. Her name is Margaret Muscat. Hi, Margaret.
Hi, Fiona. Thank you for having me.
For those who don't know you, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, my name's Margaret Muscat, and I'm a clinical hypnotherapist based in Mulgoa, New South Wales, Sydney, Australia. And I've been running my practice now since 2020. Started smack banging COVID. That was difficult as we weren't trained in doing Zoom sessions. So that was very new to me, and now I'm, doing Zoom sessions to clients with who need my help using strategic psychotherapy and clinical hypnotherapy. And I also use neuro-linguistic programming, which is neuro meaning the mind, linguistic meaning your language, and programming, which is resetting your mind, resetting the programs that you have. So, removing limiting beliefs and creating change within your mindset to get mental clarity. So, I have been always interested in mental health and had my own journey of mental health. For 25 years, I tried every method known to man to try and help myself through anxiety and depression. And eventually, I hit a life change and decided that this is my purpose. This is what I want to do. I want to be able to help others found the resources that I found to help people with mental health issues. So I help people with anxiety, depression, trauma, alcohol addiction, and other substance addictions. And they get a better life, feeling joy, having mental clarity, and being back in control of their lives. So that's a little bit about me.
Great. Yeah. Well, in my experience, many of us in this kind of healing field, whether it's mental, physical health, whatever it is, we're kind of the wounded healers. We're people who've actually had similar issues, health issues, mental health issues, whatever it is, and we've had to try and figure out how to overcome them. And it's often what leads us on this path. So it's not unusual that we have our own story. Which is useful for people to know, I think, because I think sometimes when people think they're going to someone for help with health or mental health, that person's got it all together, all perfect, don't know how it feels, and it's quite often the opposite to that. That many of us, we've got our scars and our histories and our stories to tell, and we've kind of gone through our version of those issues, and that's why we're so interested and why we get so passionate about it.
That is so true. And some of the most amazing people that have been through, climbs in their life and through bumps in their life and through feeling down and, coping with things that generally happen in life that aren't easy to deal with, like grief and trauma. Um, having inside experience of that helps me to understand better what a client needs to change, to get their resources. And I do that using strategic psychotherapy.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful tool when you add strategic psychotherapy with hypnosis to get a result for the client. And that turnaround's quite quickly, provided they're open to suggestion.
Yes. Yeah. And actually, on that note, it's probably worth just before we launch into, because today I wanted to talk to you about addictions today, but just quickly before we launch into that, I just want to clarify, and I think it's important to do this. Sometimes people get confused with hypnotherapy and they associate hypnotherapy with hypnotists who do stage shows. It is absolutely not the same thing. And
Definitely not.
and those people who I've been to those shows where they do that sort of get someone to act like a chook or whatever. And what I know for sure, and you'll confirm this for me, is that they can't get you to do that if you didn't want to do that already. because I was a person in the audience who they could not get to do those things. And there was many of us. So there's like a certain percentage of people who will go to those shows and they go there thinking, I'd love to be a chook, on the stage. And they're the people that they can get to do it. So it's not, and therapy also, obviously, there's ethical considerations that you would only support someone to do something that they choose to do. So just clarify that with me. So because people get really weird about hypnotherapy, I find.
100%, Fiona.
Yes.
You know, clients think, oh, you're going to hypnotize me. And I'm like, no, you're in control the whole time.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
way I explain this is if you're in a car and your GPS signal is gone, meaning, say, your thoughts, your patterning, and the way you think. So you're thinking in a very negative mindset.
Yes.
If you're in your car, your GPS signal's gone off, and you need someone to help you get to your destination.
Mm,
Well, I don't take over control of the car.
mm,
You're in your car, you've got
yes.
no signal. I appear in the passenger seat. I
Yes.
ask you, where do you want to go? You're open to my suggestion. Where do you want to go? Then
Mm,
you tell me exactly where you want to get to. You may want to feel happier. You want to explore a time when you had joy. If you could get that back, being in control, not having these ruminating thoughts. And
yes.
so I guide you to
Yeah.
your destination. And I'm relying on you to give me direction.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's where the power of hypnosis works. So I don't control you. You're
No.
still controlling the vehicle, which is your mind, and
Yes.
I am just your guide. And in that, clients find that it's okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's the way I help.
I just thought it was worth clarifying that because I've had hypnotherapy before and I've got friends, including you, who are hypnotherapists. And I know that people get a bit weird around it because if the only experience you've had is seeing the TV stuff, you might not
Yeah,
understand what it is. So I just thought before we begin, just clarify that so people
definitely.
understand that. But what I wanted to talk about is you and I we work with people in different ways, but we work with people with various addictions. In particular, for me, I work a lot with food addiction and all the different sort of issues that people have with shame and blame and the cycles around food. And I know that you work with that as well, but you also work a lot with alcohol addiction and some others. And there's definitely a crossover between those two because it's not necessarily about what someone's addicted to. It's kind of more about what's underneath that. So would you like to talk a little bit more about that in regards to alcohol and kind of what are the common things that maybe are behind that behavior? So they're choosing the alcohol, but why are they choosing it?
Okay, so with any kind of addiction, whether it's food, substance, alcohol, when people feel stuck and they do not have the ability to release that negative mindset, they have a low tolerance for discomfort. And so they're for whatever reason, emotionally, some things happened in their life, whether it's a relationship issue, a work issue, issue with family members, they have a low tolerance for discomfort. So they turn to food, alcohol. They sometimes even can turn to another addiction, such as gambling.
Mm,
And so, what I do with clients is, I question them. I'm not in the field of being a nutritionalist, and but I do know what works and what doesn't work. So if they want to change their food over from snacking on chocolates or drinking alcohol to soothe their relax them at the end of the day, where it's getting to be a problem if they're drinking a whole bottle of alcohol, like a whole bottle of wine before bed just to relax, to unwind.
yeah.
Well, we can change that up. We can address the issues, the emotional issues, and give them the tools and resources to cut back and still be able to enjoy one or two drinks on the weekend, but not have to drink every evening just to soothe themselves and just to be able to relax. So they get a recording a specific recording tailored to them. And I use their language specific to them to help them to move past and to change it up. So they're, rather than grabbing a bottle of alcohol, we go through the whole process of their daily routine of what they eat, what they consume, what they drink, what their preferred drink is that's healthy for them, so they can change all that up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too. It's what you were talking about there was is kind of identifying what like what's the purpose, what are they using the alcohol for, or in my case I have worked with some people around alcohol, but I've worked a lot more with food, of course. But it's what are they using it for. And I know with food I see different things. So one of the things that you were just talking about there was that whole thing of sometimes that is the only thing that the person does all day that's for them, that's about them, that gives them any joy or fun or whatever it is. And so in that case, then it's looking at, well, what's going on in their life? Like, why is there no joy or no fun in their life at all anywhere else? And is there other ways of bringing that in that don't require the alcohol? So sometimes it's actually just about the person wanting just some fun, and that's what it is. But sometimes it's what you're talking about there as well. Sometimes it's kind of not wanting to have a certain feeling, wanting to numb yourself, or wanting to like sort of push down or keep down certain uncomfortable feelings, that discomfort you were talking about before, that not wanting to have certain feelings. So that it's looking at that too, isn't it? So it's looking at, is a person just like wanting to have a bit of fun in their life because they just don't have any joy, or are they actively trying to push down a feeling or avoid a certain feeling, or somehow numb themselves? And that they're different motivations, so it's a different way of approaching. But in both cases, it's looking at obviously people's habits and things like that, but there's sort of they're different causes, so it's a bit of a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing is sometimes it's just habit and boredom.
Mm,
If they're alone, and it just could be the habit of, picking up a glass when
mm,
they're sitting watching the telly at night,
yeah,
and it just becomes a routine and a habit. And before they know, it's to the point where they're, could be just falling asleep on the lounge, and we've got to change that habit. They realize it's a problem when they wake up and they go, oh, I didn't realize I fell asleep. And
mm,
the alcohol's, too much for their body. That's when they realize there's that bit of shame and guilt. And they think, well, I need to change, but I don't know how. I need help. And
mm,
that's when they will reach out.
yeah. Yeah, and I find also, again, with food, and you probably see it with alcohol, but what happens is we can get in a bit of a shame spiral. So we feel ashamed of something that maybe we feel that we're not managing, or that we can't control, or whatever it is, and then we start having all these. I don't have enough self discipline. I don't have enough self control, and we go into all of this kind of shame stuff. And then, of course, if one of the ways that you manage difficult feelings is by numbing them with alcohol, food, whatever, insert thing, insert whatever the issue is, then you tend to go back to that thing. So then it actually just becomes this cycle that's sort of, between shame and then not wanting to feel the shame. And so using the thing, your go-to method for managing that, and then that causing the shame, and it's starting all over again.
Yeah, and it's important to find the why.
Mm,
It could be a child sees them and they're embarrassed. It could be their partner threatens to leave because you're not looking after yourself. It's affecting our family. It's up to you to quit, and they're just stuck. They don't know how to change, and feeling those emotions and not knowing how to address those emotions, not understanding, well, how can I change where I'm still sitting in the same house, in the same place, with the same job? And I get them to look at, well, what was it like before? Was there a time you felt that joy? Was there a time you had that control? They then become their tools, and I put their tools in the hypnosis. And sometimes they can even come up with their own tools when in hypnosis because they're in that relaxed state. And
mm,
it's not something that you can do consciously when you're awake and say, oh, okay, I'm going to relax.
Yes.
So, in that environment where they're coming to actually realize that they're there to create change, that they can, by being guided, but being in control at the same time, to make those changes so they're not in that discomfort, they're not in that repetitive pattern.
Mm.
And I've even had a lady that came to me and she would just snack on junk food at night just constantly. And she said, I'm just bored. I don't know what else to do. I'm a single person and I would just, when I sit down to watch the TV, I enjoy having a snack. And so I said to her, well, what's something else that you can eat that's not chocolate, that's not snacks? Is there something? And we got down to the texture and we found it was the crunch. She likes the crunch. So we swapped to the foods that she liked that were healthy. And she
Mm.
would prepare them before she would go sit down. So that way she doesn't reach for the snack. She's reaching for cucumber sticks, carrot sticks, and things that have that crunch. And it
Mm.
gives her that comfort, but in a
Yeah.
healthy way. And that's so important,
Mm.
as you would know, to have a healthy mind, a healthy body.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what I often do with my clients is, it might be, well, can you just go and make a pot of chamomile tea or something like that? Something that, and you pop it in you might have a nice fancy teapot or a fancy cup or something like that. But what essentially it is, and is it's creating a rituals. It's creating new rituals, because
Yeah,
I think a lot of these things they become habit, they become ritual, and rituals do have a certain, there's a benefit around it, and there's, we get a comfort in it. And so I find that creating new rituals, whatever they are, but sort of working with that person to create that ritual, is, again, it's just replacing one ritual with another. So you're not sort of saying, whatever you do, just sit there and just avoid the chocolate or the alcohol or whatever it is. It's
yeah,
actually actively creating new rituals that will support that person.
100%. That is the best way to go. We're replacing patterns, negative patterns, with positive patterns.
Mm.
And, the provided a client is open to suggestion,
Mm.
they can change so many different things within their life, especially when it comes to around addiction.
Yes. Yeah. And one thing that I know from the nutritional point of view as well, obviously I'm not just looking at someone's choices or their habits. I'm also looking at what, like, other things that could be behind it or now are causing problems because of that addiction. And so, for example, someone might have their gut bacteria out of whack and it causes them to crave sugar all of the time. They could be low in magnesium or B vitamins, particularly with alcohol. Alcohol will actually drive that reduced magnesium, and also in severe cases, in people with chronic issues with alcohol, they end up with a B1 deficiency, and that actually causes a syndrome that will cause that short-term memory loss and that difficulty maintaining or getting new memories. But also over time, it sort of ends up being quite severe. It's lots of confusion and affects your vision and tremors and all of the disorientation, all the things. So obviously for me, I'm looking at nutritional deficiencies. I'm looking at the gut bacteria, and also just things like, so a lot of these things, whether it's sugar or whether it's alcohol, they absolutely do affect your liver. And in fact, more cases now of, I can't remember the numbers, but I know a lot more cases now of fatty liver disease are non-alcoholic fatty liver disease that are caused by sugary foods as opposed to alcohol. So I see fatty liver disease a lot in my clinic, and it's looking at that. It's looking at someone's gut function and it's treating those conditions, and also just things like, because again, just from a mental health perspective, and those who follow this podcast will know this. I've done a few episodes along these lines, but there's a lot of nutritional aspects to supporting your mental health, because even just things like the neurotransmitters in your brain, the serotonin and dopamine and melatonin and all of those, well, they're made from amino acids, which are proteins. So we actually do need to eat protein which is, your fish or your chicken or your nuts and seeds or your eggs, those kinds of things. We need to eat our protein, and we also need to be able to digest and absorb protein to then be able to make those neurotransmitters. But you also need B vitamins and magnesium and vitamin C and all sorts of other nutrients to help you make those neurotransmitters. So what you eat really matters, because it's actually what your body uses to make structures, to make hormones, to make neurotransmitters, and all of those things. So there's certainly a lot of nutritional things that people can do. And of course, if you're treating people with mental health issues, as I do as well, you'll understand the benefit of exercise and getting outside and all of those things. So it's also important to look at these things from a holistic point of view and looking at kind of all of the factors that might be affecting someone. It's often not just one thing. It becomes this, and it's kind of chicken or egg. How did something begin? What's causing it? What's right? I don't know. But in the end, all of these things feed into each other. So if you kind of just look at one thing and you're not looking at the other, like if you're trying to get someone to make changes, but they've got a severe B vitamin deficiency or magnesium deficiency, they're going to be really craving carbohydrates and they're going to be really confused. So sometimes you might need to sort of manage someone physically to support their ability to do the other changes. So all of it's important, but it's really useful for people to understand this as well, because instead of seeing that you're some sort of failure, just look, you're in a situation where it's kind of like maybe a lot of things are working against you all at the same time for a whole bunch of reasons, and you can work with professionals to help explore those things and resolve those things bit by bit. But it's not because you just don't have any self-discipline or self-control. There's so much more that can be behind it, physically, emotionally, and also you were talking before about, I think you mentioned someone who's experienced any kind of trauma or other issues or grief, or all of those things contribute. So it's actually just looking at all of the things and seeing what needs attention and where they need support.
100%. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was just about to mention, it's so important to put exercise in there. The time that you're spending exercising, that's time that you're able to release those thoughts. And if they can get back to changing their diet and then also adding exercise in, they feel a sense of achievement, and that gets that serotonin, that dopamine reactivating, and it's 100%, mind, body, and getting them happy again with their spirit. So if everything aligns, and if we can get them in a great routine like they once had before the problem came about, then it's quite easy for them to go back into good habits rather than sitting and staying in negative habits that give them the low self-esteem. Oh, it's, going round in circles, and being able to break those cycles.
Mm.
It can, if I could take photos of a client before they walk into my practice and then after, the change on their face, their glow. And it's strange to say, but it's true. I can physically see it, that there's a change, there's a shift. And I'm sure the way you work with nutrition, that, their skin, everything, every
Yeah,
part of them
skin,
starts to
eyes,
change.
and not just that, there's that glow, that inner glow that you see in people, isn't there? That just on the
100%.
inside, they're glowing. There's a difference when you first meet someone and their eyes are kind of, they're not quite focused. They're not quite there. They're just not quite there. It's like they're not
Yeah.
fully embodied or something. I don't know. And that's the other thing too, actually, that I work a lot with in my clients, is actually like embodying and being present, because
Mhm.
I think that that's an issue that we have as well. That is probably going to be more of an issue these days with all of these metaverses and all. I don't know. I just think about all these things coming in the future where people are walking around wearing those glasses and being off in. They're watching 6 YouTube videos while they're walking down the street or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to become a bigger and bigger problem. But essentially, what I find is, in my experience, people, for various reasons, they disembody. So they could disembody because of some previous abuse or some issue like that, or they could disembody because they're just not happy or comfortable in their bodies, and sometimes, and various. Look, there's various psychological and physical reasons why someone does this. But what I find that can be challenging as well. So for example, I find if a client is, maybe if they've got a lot of pain, or they're carrying a lot of weight, or it could be the combination of the two things, whatever it is. But often they just don't want to be present in their body because they feel uncomfortable there. So they just kind of detach. But then what happens there is then what they do is they do a whole lot of unconscious behaviors. So like you were talking about before, sitting on the lounge with, the packet of chips or whatever it is, and they honestly, they could just eat the whole packet and not realize that they'd
Yeah.
even started, sort of thing. And so what I find as well is that I find that it's, I don't know, in my experience anyway, I think it's hard to heal your body if you're just not present and you're
Yeah,
just not noticing. So a big
definitely.
part of what I do is actually getting people to, I sort of do a breathing technique before they eat. So I get them to do like 4 seconds in, 7 seconds out, just for 1 minute. It's that breathing technique, because it takes them from fight or flight and puts them into rest and digest before they
Yes.
eat a meal. And we need to be in rest and digest, because rest and digest is how your body actually digests the food. It allows it to make all of the digestive enzymes and things so you can digest and absorb the nutrients. So that's getting them present, getting their body wired ready for it. Because if you're eating unconsciously, your body probably doesn't even realize there's food coming, and suddenly there's food and your body's in some other stress mode or something. So it's not making digestive enzymes. And then that person's going to end up with a lot of digestive discomfort and issues. But also, we're going to end up with the issues. I think that when we disembody, and you see it actually, I won't sort of name who they are. I don't want to get in trouble on YouTube, but there are some YouTubers, it's very distressing actually, who are actively eating themselves to death, is the nicest way I could say it. And you can see that they're doing it for likes and for all that sort of stuff. Um, you can see them disembodying, because you just cannot continually abuse your body and do things that are really harmful to your body and harmful to your health over and over again, and be present while you're doing it. So the only way to do it is kind of to just detach yourself. So is that something that you witness and that you see with your clients?
Yeah, look, definitely. When it comes to trauma and past trauma, um, you know, what I do is use absurdity to trump trauma, because you cannot run the pattern of
Mm,
trauma and absurdity at
mm,
the same time. So
okay.
it's a form of dissociation. So there's an NLP, neuro linguistic programming technique that I use, which is called the control room.
Mm,
And that gets the client back in control. So when they think of that trauma, they have got a resource.
mm,
And rather than it being they go back and feel the emotions, we break the emotion to the trauma by putting in absurdity. And it does sound a bit weird, but
mm,
the fact is it works, and
mm,
it works really, really well. So, you know, when I've got clients that are in both depression, which is past orientated, and I've got clients that are running anxiety, which is future orientation,
mm,
like you said, we need to be here in the present moment.
mm,
And so what I help clients to do is to detach from their past.
mm,
And the future is unknown. We can't know all the outcomes. And getting them comfortable in reality testing. I mean, sometimes they can get so caught up in thinking that if they're in a room, and this is a way I do reality testing, if you're in a room and there's a cat in the room, there's not much harm coming your way. You know, it's just a cat.
mm,
But if you're imagining a lion in the room, well,
mm,
you want to run to the door. So we
mm,
do that reality testing. And then when they realize that they're fearing something
mm,
that really isn't there, that then they can reassess and go, you're right. If I just concentrate on today, then
mm,
I'm going to be able to much better get through the day than
mm,
worrying about the future. So it's important to bring them back into the present, and that is a big key factor.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and in most cases, it's that kind of, look around the room. Where are you? What's going on? In most
Exactly.
cases, you are safe at this time. No matter what's going on in your life at this moment, at this immediate moment, you're okay. And I think it is important to do that because there's a lot of things going on in the world, and life is challenging. Life is full of challenges and ups and downs and all of that. So there's times where things won't be okay, and there's times where they will be okay, and everything in between. But it's really more about, and this is actually something I discussed in another episode recently, just a solo episode. But I think that sometimes people get confused and uh, think that having negative feelings at all is a bad thing, or it's not normal, or it means they've got a mental health issue. And the truth is that we experience all emotions, and we experience sadness and loss and grief, and we also have happiness and all of the things in between. And a normal life experience, you will experience all of those. And that itself is not a pathology. It's not a pathology to feel sad. Like, my mother passed away nearly 3 years ago, and I had really intense grief for a long time. And for a long time, I was just sad. And I was chatting to my doctor about it, and I just said, "Look, yeah, I am sad. I'm really like, I was just profoundly sad for a really long time. But I don't think that is a diagnosable pathology. I think it's called grief." And
Yeah.
it's okay to be sad. Now, if it was affecting my ability to function and live, and if I was in that profound sadness for the rest of my life and was never able to move on, then maybe at some point, obviously the DSM, I don't know the rules, but at some point that becomes an issue. But it wasn't. I understood that I was just grieving for someone I loved, and that was a normal response, and that was okay. And so what I did is I accepted and allowed for the profound sadness, and just said, okay, it's part of my life at the moment, but that's normal, right? So I
Yeah.
think that we kind of get whatever it is, and we've all had our version of that. I'm not sort of not special by any means with that, but I think it's sometimes we try and pathologize things that are just normal human emotions.
Yeah, and grief is something that's difficult to navigate through, and I I actually help people with grief because it does end up from sadness to depression, and reminiscing on past and memories, and thinking of future events that now they're no longer going to be here for certain events. And dates and memories can sometimes lead us to be stuck.
Mm,
And so I also help clients with grief, and I help them to focus on, the feelings and the thoughts that they pay attention to, and where to let go, and
yes. Yeah.
how to navigate to get to a point where they can actually remember their loved one, or past pet even. Um, pets can be like a member of the family, and
Yes.
just to get them to remember the good times, and to be able to smile
Yes.
about that, and
Mm,
put that in place of feeling that constant sadness and that void that
yes.
sometimes, that most of the time is involved with grief. So there's
Yeah.
many different things that I can work with, provided the client's open and willing, and to
Yeah.
build that rapport to move them forward.
Yeah. And look, like you said, there are lots of things that you can do to support yourself. I was just sort of pointing out that it's also okay
It
to
is
have
okay.
those feelings.
Yeah,
It
it
doesn't
definitely
mean
is okay. It's
it
a
doesn't mean there's
part of
something wrong
life.
with you. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's a
I
part of
think
life.
I don't know, because of I don't know, in I can only speak on, I'm Australian, I live in Sydney, and I come from that kind of Irish, English, whatever background, Scottish. So I can only speak in my personal experience. But in my personal experience, in our culture, what we do is, when like if a child is screaming or yelling or crying or something like that, what we try and do is we try and stop them as quickly as we can, so usually it's with food. It's, here's the ice cream, here's the chocolate, here's the whatever, and what we're trying to do, well, the way I see it is, what we're trying to do is we're trying to stop our own discomfort, because we're not comfortable with strong feelings and emotions. And so we're trying to stop their strong feelings and emotions. Now, I'm not saying there's never a reason for that, of course, like, you're sitting in church or you're at a wedding, or I don't know. There's reasons why, like, I'm not saying it as a judgmental thing. But
Yeah.
what happens is that we are uncomfortable, a lot of us, with a lot of those feelings, because it's never been okay in our families to have them. It's never been acceptable to have strong feelings and show that you have those strong feelings. And so we have learned how to treat children with sugar to manage those feelings and teach them. I think that teaches a couple of very powerful lessons to those children. I think it teaches that it's not okay to have strong feelings. It's certainly not okay to show those strong feelings. And woohoo, sugar fixes it. So I actually personally think that's one of the things that starts us on that road to reaching for something to soothe.
Yeah. It's
And
it's in our nature to want to soothe ourselves, and having a one or two pieces of chocolate is okay, but when you're consuming half a bar or a whole bar, then that's a problem. That's when it becomes a problem, and the problem needs to be addressed.
yes, yeah, and that there's breast milk is sweet, and there's a soothing that is associated with that. So, like you said, it is in our nature, and it's not unusual or anything. But I just find that in our culture, anyway, the culture that I've grown up in, it's sort of always been a little bit, not okay to have feelings necessarily. So a lot of us have not learned how to actually have feelings. So I just think it's okay to learn how to have a feeling and how to sit with that feeling for 5 minutes.
Yeah,
You know,
that's so true. It's
Sometimes I might say to my client, like, okay, you can have the chocolate, but how about you just let yourself have 5 minutes of just having the feeling, just so
yeah,
that you'll learn that you're not going to die from the feeling. Because in
exactly.
most cases, I'm not talking about if someone's having, suicidal ideology or something like that. I shouldn't use that language on YouTube; it will get me cancelled. But anyway, certain words, you trigger words on YouTube. So not obviously in severe situations like that, but for the majority of us, we're just having a feeling, we're having an emotion, whatever it is. It's good to actually learn to sit with it for at least 5 minutes and just know that you will survive, and it's okay to have an uncomfortable feeling, because feelings are feelings. And even like with things like grief, you need to move through it to move past it. So
Yeah,
just pretending you don't have a feeling or just pushing it down doesn't solve it.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you think it's worth talking about or mentioning in regards to addictions?
Well, when it comes to addictions, it's important to realize, to have that realization, and to want to reach out and get help. And
Mm,
whatever that reason is, being loved ones, taking the brunt of what they're seeing, and if you're not, you're knowing that you're sometimes the cause, it doesn't mean that it's, you have some form of control, that the addiction hasn't consumed you. So to get help, and there are ways to change patterns, and it's not all or nothing. Like,
mm,
I don't set clients up for failure. If they want to continue to have alcohol to celebrate life, if they're at a wedding and they want to toast the married couple,
mm,
to be able to have a glass or two of champagne or wine, whatever they choose, but not to excess, that they can't remember the event.
mm,
So setting themselves up for realistic goals that are achievable. And it's the same with food, and it's the same with, um, you know, uh, either food or alcohol. When
mm,
it comes to other things like gambling and other types of substance abuse, It's trying to get them to understand, you know, their why. And once they understand their why, that is key to getting them to change, to getting
Yes.
them to quit. So it just depends on what we're working with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've seen many a client that have been able to shift from drinking all weekend and drinking every day to only having a couple of drinks on the weekend.
Mm.
And, I get that bedazzled look. I can't believe it happened so quick. How
Yeah.
did you do that? And then I put it back to them. I didn't do anything. I was just your guide. You took it on board. You wanted to create change.
Mm.
You're now in control. And they're like, wow, that was just, it's so much easier than people think
Mm.
that it is. It's an achievable thing. It's an
Yes.
achievable thing.
I think it's worth mentioning too, because I've actually done another episode on this, specifically talking about language. So I will clarify too, because I've talked today about food addiction. Generally, I don't like to talk about. I don't like to call it an addiction in regards to food. And the reason I don't like to use that language is like I might use a term like habituation, and you might say, same, different. And it sort of is. But the reason I don't use that language around food, or I usually don't use that language around food, is because food is actually something we need to survive. We need to live. We need food for survival. We don't need alcohol for survival, but we certainly need food for survival. And most of us understand when we talk about addictions and when we talk about solutions or programs to help people deal with addictions, many of those, if not all of those, are abstinence based programs. So we see that, the solution to, and I know you're saying here that it's not always the case, but largely the programs like AA and NA and all of those things, they're abstinence based. So it's like you just cannot have the thing. Well, you can't do that with food because we actually need food for survival. So the problem with calling food an addiction, in my idea of it anyway, is that it sets a person up for failure already, because they're actually battling against, I shouldn't have food. Food's bad. So I like to use different language in regards to food, because it is something that's vital for survival, and I think we need to not associate it with abstinence, rather balance, not abstinence. And I know you were talking about
Moderation.
balance before, but just from a language point of view, I think that that's important distinction anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely more about healthy eating, changing your eating habits.
Yeah,
So, and doing exercise is important as well.
yeah,
So you can enjoy life, enjoy food, everything in moderation,
yeah.
and just have a healthier mind and body, and being in control of,
Mm,
you know, what you're putting into your body,
yeah,
and living a healthy life.
yeah. And this is a question without notice. So you can choose to not answer it or not. But I was also thinking then too, because you talk about language with the NLP and those sorts of things, is I have a problem with the format of whether it be AA, or I know I've got clients who've talked about Overeaters Anonymous. I'm not overall, like, I think they can do a lot of great things, but I do have a problem with someone getting up at every meeting and saying, "Hi, I'm Fiona and I'm an overeater," or "I'm an alcoholic," or whatever it is. I just think that when you I personally think that when you label yourself as that thing, well, that's who you are. You can't change that. Where to me, it's like, okay, it could be, "Hi, I'm Fiona and sometimes I overeat." And that's still true, but it's not who I am. It's a behavior. It's something I do. So I can change a behavior, but I can't necessarily change who I am. So I'm quite uncomfortable with the sort of labeling myself as the thing. What are your thoughts around that?
I so agree with that, Fiona. You know, once you put a label on something, it's permanent.
Mm, yeah,
If
yeah,
we if we if we take away some of that labeling and that shaming,
mm,
you are not fully alcohol. You are
yeah,
not fully food. We are
yeah,
made up of different parts, and we are human. We are human beings, and
yeah,
we are what we put into ourselves. And to have a label is just concrete.
Yeah.
And if we can break that,
Mm.
it would just be so much easier to move forward from it.
Yeah, and look, I
And
understand, like, I get that there I suspect what's behind it is people taking personal responsibility. So
yeah,
people saying, "This is something I'm doing, and this is something I'm gonna do something about." So I get that, and I support that. I just think you can say, "This is something I do," without saying, "This is something I am."
yeah, maybe we need to reassess the language that
Mm,
we're saying,
yes.
to make it easier for us. It's not about not taking responsibility, but to take away that label.
Yeah.
We know we're all in that group for the same reason,
Yes.
but why do we have to label ourselves? It's
Yeah.
just so rigid in
I
thinking and
think it's
so rigid
label the
in behavior.
behavior. Label the
Yeah,
behavior, but don't label the person. That's all. My issue is that. It's like identify and label the behavior. And yes, we're there, we're about addressing a behavior. But this is about a behavior. It's not about who you are, because I think it just leads back to all that shame stuff. Because if essentially if it's like, well, okay, I'm the one who's deficient. I've just got a deficit. I've got something wrong with me. Everybody else can figure it out, but I'm somehow flawed. So, well, no, well, you are flawed because you're human, and we all are, and that's fine. But I just think it's like, no, no, this is a behavior. It's not who you are. It's something that you do, and it's something that you can choose not to do, or you can get support around making those choices and making better choices. So I just think that something that in the kind of addiction world, I think that that language really drives me nuts.
it is a very limiting belief. So once you've got that limiting belief, it's stopping you from transitioning forward. And we need to be very aware of and pay attention to, you know, um, those limiting beliefs to be able to break the pattern and break the cycle.
Yes. Well, it's a difference between feeling disempowered, like, I am this. Oh, okay, not much we can do about that. Or I have this habit. However, I've got strategies and I'm using these strategies. Gives one gives you power and gives you a level of control over it, and the other absolutely just takes the power away.
Exactly. And what we are is we're both about empowering people to
Mm,
take control, to take action where they feel stuck, to
yeah.
move forward and to get that control back so they can feel empowered and live a better and healthier and happier life.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And look, I've had my own issues with chocolate challenges around chocolate, habituation around chocolate, and I also, when I was younger, I actually was. This year is actually 30 years since I drank alcohol, and while I would say I probably never got to a point where it totally was well. I probably wouldn't have called myself an alcoholic, but in saying that, I was absolutely heading for that. So I had a very not healthy relationship with alcohol. And I was using alcohol, I was starting to use alcohol to soothe myself and to calm myself. And I was doing that, starting to do that a lot, doing binge drinking. And my body stopped me. So my liver kind of just said, yep, no, you're not going to do this anymore. So basically, I lost all tolerance to alcohol, where one drink would make me violently ill within about 20 minutes. And I'd be violently ill for about 3 days. And after that happened a couple of times, I stopped. So
Your body knows how to talk to you, and even myself, I've had that personal experience where I
yeah,
was I was very ill once in hospital, and
um,
since then I've had issues with my bladder. So if I take on board alcohol, that causes all lots of issues with my bladder, even sweet things. So I've had to change my diet,
yeah,
and for me, my resource is, well, do you want to end up in hospital or having surgery every year? And my answer to that is no. I
no,
don't like the pain of
no,
surgery and the recovery time.
no,
So
mm,
I've really minimized and changed the way I celebrate life.
yes,
For me, it's if have something to celebrate, it'll be soda water with a
mm,
taste of drop of alcohol, just to know I've got that taste and I'm still part of the social, celebration.
yes, yeah, and look,
Within moderation,
yeah,
anything is possible. To really cut yourself off of everything
Yes.
is, it's like we've got a void. And if we can find, you know, um, little ways where which we can tweak and enjoy,
Yes.
that's great. But when your body just says no, it means no. So listen to your body, listen
Yeah.
to what.
Well, it made it impossible for me not to. Like, I mean, honestly, I looking back, like, if you had have told me all of things that alcohol do,
Mm,
I wouldn't have cared. I was 23. Well, I would
yeah,
not have cared. I would not have listened. And so I wouldn't have stopped. I wouldn't have stopped at that point, I wouldn't have stopped. I don't know what point I would have had to get to before I would have stopped. So I'm actually really grateful that my body absolutely stopped me. I feel like, to me, in my mind, it's like if my guardian angel come along, slap me upside the head a
it was a
couple of
blessing.
and said, stop it, Fiona, stop it. You're needed for other things. Killing yourself with alcohol isn't going to be helpful. So I just decided to, like, I've done a lot with my health over the years, and maybe I could tolerate alcohol now, maybe I couldn't, but I just personally decided, I'm just not going to go there. I wasn't managing it in a healthier way, and so, like, I'm not obviously not against people drinking alcohol, and some people can and do drink alcohol in in sensible ways, and that's fine. I just wasn't doing that, and I'm not
Yeah,
quite sure what would happen if I started drinking again. And so I just don't even see the point. Besides, it's so expensive to drink alcohol now.
it
I can't
is
believe how much people
so
pay for it.
expensive. And it's really is, if we looked at it like a luxury, not a necessity, it would
Mm.
be so much better.
Yes, yeah,
But in,
exactly.
in our culture in Australia, it's just, it's a go-to.
Yes, yeah,
And
it is.
we don't actually realize what a huge problem it is in our community and
Yes.
in society. It's the untalked about almost drug that's
Well,
ruining lives and families.
it is the acceptable drug too, because I know that someone, I don't know, it was a comedian or who it was. I heard this the other day. I can't attribute it because I can't remember who said it, but they said that, you know, and this is true, that when you say that you don't drink alcohol, people actually respond in, like, and it's a really weird thing actually. What happens to me all the time is I don't go around everyone going, "Oh, I don't drink, I don't drink." But if people are offering me alcoholic drinks, usually I just start the conversation. I just say I don't drink alcohol, because if I don't say that, they say, "Oh, well," because they say, "Do you want some wine?" And I say, "Oh, no. Oh, we've got beer. Oh, we've got this. So we've got," and so it's easier for me just to say, "No, I don't drink alcohol," the first thing I say. But not there's two kind of responses to see. One is that people think that there's something weird, like, wrong with you. So they actually think it's like, what's wrong with you? So it's actually seen as like this weird, bad, wrong thing. But the other thing is, but the other thing that happens, I see a lot, is people's first responses, well, I don't drink much. Like, they somehow, like, talk about their own drinking.
Yeah, it's
And I
interesting,
wasn't
isn't it?
talking about their drinking, I was just saying I don't drink. And but as I don't drink seems to mean to other people, like, to me, it just means I don't drink, right? That's I don't, right? That's all it means, right? It means full stop. I don't drink, full stop. But to some people, many people I've found, it means I don't drink and I'm judging you for drinking, and I think that you drink too
Yeah,
much. And so people's their response to me saying I don't drink is, "Well, I don't drink much, or I just on special occasion." I didn't
yeah,
ask.
yeah.
I didn't ask. So it's really funny. So you can sort of see the people who might be feeling a bit uncomfortable about their choices, and my choice makes them feel uncomfortable. It's like, "No, no, no, I'm not saying that to make you feel uncomfortable.
It's
It's just
interesting,
about me.
isn't
I don't
it?
drink."
Yeah, so
And to me,
interesting.
yeah, it's weird that we actually make it weird and strange to make the choice not to, for
Yeah,
whatever reason. So that it is a real cultural thing in Australia, that alcohol's sort of part of everything.
yeah,
And
it is.
and for me, it's tea. So I'm the person at the bar, that people, my friends are having shots, and I'm saying, "Can I get a pot of tea, please? English breakfast, if you please." And even better if it's not in a paper cup, because that's not very civilized. I really would like some china. So I'm that person.
Oh, yeah, the things we do to, to try and, you just try and normalize our choices. And
Yes,
if
yeah,
we just, let go of, you don't need to be, do, or have a certain thing in your life to feel complete. And,
yes.
let's normalize just being who we are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And, the big, I suppose, look, summing this up would be, do you, first of all, is it an issue? Just because you eat chocolate or drink alcohol, it doesn't mean it's an issue. But how much are you having? And if you're
Exactly.
sort of thinking about it, or if you're worried about it, or if you're feeling a bit paranoid about it, or whatever, defensive about it, or maybe it is an issue. But so the question is
Yeah.
it an issue? So that's the first thing. Is it affecting your life? Is it affecting your health? Is it
Yeah.
affecting your relationships?
Correct.
And so if it is an issue, then seek help. Go and find some people who can support you, because it doesn't mean you're defective. It just means that you've got a challenge, and life is very challenging. We have lots of challenges. That's okay. So it's just go and get the help that you need, and go and get some support around it. But just as we kind of wind up here, I'd just like to make sure that a couple of things, that I know that you've got a book, so I'd like you to tell me about your book and tell people where they can get in contact with you, maybe your website or something like that.
Okay, so this is the book. It's called Making a Difference, and that was launched in August last year.
Yes.
And my chapter, there's 14 authors worldwide, and my chapter is called How to Create Freedom from Mental Chaos to Mental Clarity and Inner Peace. And so it talks a bit about my personal experience, and how I journeyed through anxiety, depression, and trauma, and what led me to become a hypnotherapist. And there's a lot of good little tools in there about how to have good mental health and get that inner clarity and mental peace within. So
Yes.
that's available on Amazon. It's also available on my website at hilltophypnotherapy.com.au.
And what's the book called again?
The book is called Making a Difference
Making a
by,
Difference.
by Hill House Publishing.
Okay, and it's hilltophypnotherapy.com.au.
hilltophypnotherapy.com.au. Yeah.
And I'll pop those links in the show notes as well. So if you've missed that, it'll be in the show notes. So look, I'd really like to thank you, Margaret. That was a really interesting conversation.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And it's been a pleasure to learn from your experience and your profession how, the what we eat and how we eat affects us completely internally,
Yes,
and to work with you understanding the mental aspect of that, combining the two together. We're just got that whole holistic approach to getting people happier, healthier, and feeling better about themselves moving forward. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this time with you.
it's been great having you on. And look, I always say that your diet is not just what you eat; it's what you say to yourself. It's whether or not you move your body. It's what you watch on television. It's what you listen to. It's your diet is so many things. It's not just one thing. It's who you spend your time with. So, well, it's everything you consume. So whether that be spiritually, visually, something you're listening to, whatever, but your diet is all of those things. And
Yeah.
so I think that when you understand that, you understand that we need to treat things from looking all of those things. But thanks a lot, Margaret.
Thank you. Thanks, Fiona.
And thank you, everybody, for listening or watching today on Rumble and YouTube. Now, please like, subscribe, share with your friends. And if you're on Rumble on YouTube, you can also leave a comment. I'd love to hear your feedback. And yeah, just please support the podcast so more people get to hear about this podcast. And I will see you all again next week. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.